Hello everyone, my name is Coach Enrico, or Coach Rico. Welcome back to another installment of our endurance running series. So the purpose of today's episode is we're going to go over kind of injury prevention and mobility work. So we'll kind of go over a couple of common endurance running injuries and how one may kind of train to proactively avoid those or kind of manage those. So we'll also cover the concept of mobility training and kind of discuss how that can help us with our running performance. And lastly, we'll be kind of joined by another special guest for our second episode, and we'll kind of get their thoughts on injury prevention as well as mobility work. So go ahead and get comfortable and stick with us through today's episode as we just kind of dive right into the topics. And so while we can never really guarantee the prevention of an injury, we can train intelligently to minimize our susceptibility to it, in a sense. So endurance running, just kind of like any other sport, creates kind of wear and tear on our bodies, and various kind of joints and ligaments and tendons. And so, kind of like always, we'll just begin with a bit of vocab, just so that once we kind of get into the main body of the section, you guys can kind of understand what we're talking about here. And so the kind of first word that we'll use would be tendon. And so a tendon is kind of fibrous tissue that connects muscle to bone. So tendons connect muscle to bone. Ligaments, these are also fibrous tissue, soft tissues that connect bone to bone. And a joint, it's just an articulation where two bones meet. So now that we've kind of worked that out, a bit of the anatomy, vocab, we can kind of just jump right into the topic for today. So we'll start at the foot and we'll kind of just work our way up to the hips. And so a common kind of thing for not just endurance runners, but also athletes in general, or just people who kind of walk a lot, would be blisters. And so blisters kind of occur when there's really excessive friction or rubbing against the skin with something else, usually probably our socks or our shoes. And this usually causes the affected area to swell with fluid or blood. And so runners will really see this in their toes or their heels and the soles of their feet. And so to treat this, there aren't really many exercises or stretches that we can do per se, but we can kind of use things like sweat wicking socks or antiperspirant powders to ensure that we kind of avoid those blisters. We can also try to make sure that we have proper fitting shoes. So shoes that aren't too narrow or too tight on our foot would kind of help decrease the amount of friction that those problem areas face. Another good strategy to kind of help reduce the occurrence of blisters would be to wrap those problem areas that you may have with bandages or wraps or something like that. And if we're having a long training session, we may want to pack extra socks, or even during a competition, pack extra sweat wicking socks. So those are a couple of things that we can do to kind of fight against blisters. And so now that we've kind of covered stuff with the foot, we'll kind of work our way up to the Achilles. And so the Achilles tendon is something that kind of connects your calf muscle to kind of your heel. And so Achilles tendinopathy is something that's pretty common amongst runners, and it's typically like an overuse injury. So it may present as something that's tender to the touch in the back of the heel, or just kind of right above that. There may be swelling there as well. And so what we can do to kind of fight against this is we can rest, and we can also kind of ice this area intermittently throughout the day or throughout the week. Over the long term, we can kind of do the following exercises to help kind of train the structures around that tendon and make them a little bit stronger and more tolerant to those long runs. So generally what we would like to do in terms of frequency is maybe about once a day if you're having some Achilles pain, and about 3 sets of 10 to 15. But let's go ahead and check out those exercises that we can do. All right, guys, so here are a couple of exercises and stretches that you can do to kind of help alleviate some of the pain and swelling with Achilles tendinopathy. So Beth here, she's just going to do a couple of heel raises or calf raises, and what she's going to do is make sure that she focuses on returning to her starting position, so going back down in a slow and controlled manner. So we're going to take about 3 seconds as we go down. And so generally you want to do this about once a day, maybe for 3 sets of 10. And once that gets pretty easy, we can even progress this to kind of single leg stuff. So again, just trying to progressively work through that injury. Yeah, perfect, just like that. And so we can even progress this to maybe a staircase, if you have stairs in your house, or some sort of like book that you can put down, just a stable surface. And what we're going to do is make sure that we're starting with our heels kind of lower than our toes, and again doing the same thing, but make sure we're focusing on going down slowly. Now if you start to experience kind of more pain once your ankle's in dorsiflexion or once your toes come up, then that could be a sign that it's insertional Achilles tendinopathy, meaning that it's right where the tendon inserts on the back of the heel. That's kind of where your problems are being caused. And so those are 2 exercises that we can kind of do. A stretch that we can do is a runner stretch or a calf stretch. And what we'll do is we'll press up against our wall, and we'll have 1 foot forward. We'll have the leg that we're going to stretch, place it backwards, and we'll try to press our heel down into the ground as far as we can. And so we usually just want to hold this for about 25 to 30 seconds with each leg. And again, about once a day, probably for 3 times you can do this. So yeah, these are a couple stretches that you can do and exercises to help alleviate Achilles tendinopathy. Let's go ahead and move on to our next set of injuries. And so working our way up the leg again, one kind of really common overuse injury that not just runners, again, that kind of athletes experience would be shin splints or medial tibial stress syndrome. And so this is something that's typically an overuse injury that everyone has experienced at one point or another. And it can kind of be caused by weak muscles kind of in the shin, so that anterior tibialis, or even kind of how we run, so our gait form. So depending on how we strike our foot down into the ground, that can kind of cause forces to impact those muscles in the front of the shin. And so this will kind of be identified by pain along kind of the shin, or soreness during or after a training session. And we'll again just kind of cut right into some exercises and stretches that we can do to not only alleviate some of that pain, but also again build that working tolerance in those structures. So here are a couple of exercises and stretches that we can do to help relieve some of the pain associated with medial tibial stress syndrome. And so what Beth is going to do is she's going to take a band and she's going to kind of wrap it around the top part of her foot. And what she's going to do is she's going to go from inwards and move her foot outwards. There we go. And so yeah, so again, it's about 3 sets of 10. Don't really need to do too many reps of this. But yeah, we just want to go in a nice, slow, controlled motion. And what this is doing is pretty much just building a little bit of strength and endurance in your front, in your anterior tibialis right here. So another exercise that we can do, and you can wrap this along a pipe or something, or see if you can have someone help you. But we'll take our band, and again, we'll place it right at the top of the foot, kind of right below where the toes start. And she'll kind of go from downwards and bring her toes towards her nose. As you can see, she's doing about 2-second hold here, isometrically, and that'll also kind of help build that strength and endurance in those muscles. Good. So another thing that you can do is you can do those heel raises again, but you can do some of the heel raises that were shown earlier. But some of the stretches which differ a little bit is we're gonna pretty much do that runner stretch again, and what we want to do is point our toes downward so that pretty much our toenails are touching the floor, and we're getting a nice deep stretch here. Again, targeting that interior tibialis. So again, a good hold for about 30 seconds will definitely help. Now, another exercise that we can do, which Beth is going to demonstrate, is we can do toe and heel walks. So, again, this pretty much just builds that tolerance within those functioning muscles surrounding our lower legs. She's walking on her heels. She's also going to walk back and forth on her tiptoes as well. Perfect. So now that we've gone through medial tibial stress syndrome or shin splints, we'll kind of move up the leg into the knee and go over some patellar tendinopathy stretches and exercises. And so patellar tendinopathy, again, just kind of working our way up the leg. So patellar tendinopathy is another clinically diagnosed kind of injury that affects the tendon. And so your patellar tendon is kind of that structure that's right below your kneecap. And what this is kind of be identified by is pain and kind of swelling, kind of again right below that kneecap or that patella, which is that bony area that sits right on our knee joint. So jumping and running can kind of aggravate this, and it's pretty much just another overuse injury. So again, resting acutely, so resting within the days following onset should help, icing it, wrapping it, but in the long term, in the long stretch, a well put together kind of exercise program to address that would help in the long run. So here are some exercises that you can kind of do to help alleviate that pain.
I hear my knees cracking as well when I'm going down. Definitely some WD for me.
Okay, last take. 3, 2, 1. All right, guys, so here are some exercises that we can do to kind of help alleviate some of that patellar pain or that pain associated with patellar tendinopathy. So to start out with, we can always do isometric exercises for the quads. And so what Beth is going to do is a wall sit. As you can see, she's got her feet spaced out evenly, about shoulder width between her feet, and she's got a 90-degree bend in her knees to where her thighs are parallel with the ground. And so what this does is it works the muscles, the quads, without them moving, so without them shortening or lengthening, and that's what isometrics are all about. So another kind of set of exercises that we can do are eccentrically focused exercises. And so for this example, we'll do squats. You can add weight if you want. Probably start out with body weight just to begin. But what she'll do is she'll come down, squat down to parallel. She'll count about 3 seconds and then come back up. So 1, 2, 3, and then she's back up. So what this is eccentric focused exercise that's lengthening the muscle, the quads here, as they're working. And so to progress that, we can go from using both legs to just using one leg. So we can start doing lunges, and again, having that 3-second count on the way down. And then we're back up. As you can see, she doesn't have her feet kind of in line. She doesn't have it toe to heel. She has her feet spaced out evenly to balance. She's not letting that back knee touch either, which is really good. And so another exercise that we can do is to just try to strengthen those hip extensors and those glutes. So we can do a little bit of bandit work. And so she's going to do some hip extensions. So it's perfect. So what she's going to do is she's going to really try to fight and not let her toes point too much outwards, rotate too much outwards. So she's going to try to activate those glutes as she's drawing that leg back, keeping it straight as much as she can. Good, good. Perfect. And so some quad stretches that we can kind of do, we can always find a wall or something, and we can have one leg resting up on the back of the wall. You can use your hands if you'd like, but pretty much just grab our foot, have one leg forward, make sure that our chest is up, and we'll just hold here for about 25 to 30 seconds. And so that's another good stretch that we can do to help alleviate patellar tendinopathy. So go ahead and try those exercises for 3 sets of 10 about once a day and see if you notice any changes. Let's go ahead and move along to tight hips or hip. So moving our way up from the knee up to the hips, we're going to talk about tight hips. And this isn't really to be confused with hip impingement syndrome. What we're going to talk about is kind of tightness and soreness in the muscles and structures around the hip, whereas hip impingement syndrome or femoral acetabular impingement syndrome, that's going to be more concerned with bone growth and kind of how the bone sits within the joint. So in terms of those muscles and structures around the hips, tight hips can mostly be experienced when we're really sore after a hard run, and we've increased the mileage that we're doing for the week, and so what we can kind of do to help kind of train our hip muscles is we can foam roll, we can do things like that. We can also kind of stretch and do some other exercises, but what we really want to try to do is create mobile hips. And so what that is going to include is kind of doing different types of rotations and hip mobility flows that kind of load those muscles, so it forces those muscles to work throughout a functional and full range of motion. And so it's important to kind of to do mobility work because it trains our hips and our joints to produce force throughout that functional range of motion, so that when it's time to do those athletic movements, we can generate useful and meaningful force. And so in our situation, that would be running, but in other situations, that could be something as like throwing a baseball or hitting a hockey ball. But we always want to try to train our joints throughout the entire range with some sort of small load. So this could be using a band, or it could be just using your own body weight. So we'll just transition over into some stretches and as well as some mobility work that really simple that you can do for your hips. All right, guys, and so here are a couple of stretches that we can help to help mobilize those hips. And so we'll start out with a hip flexor stretch. And so what Beth is going to do is she's going to come down into a lunge practically, and she's going to pretty much reach forward with her leg here. As you can see, she's kind of feeling that stretch in her left hip. So again, we can kind of make sure that we're keeping our posture upright, and we're holding for about 25 to 30 seconds before switching sides. So this is really going to help those hip flexors. Another stretch that we can do for the hip extensors or the glutes is we can do a pigeon pose stretch. And so what she'll do here is she'll again stay in that lunge position, and she'll kind of fold her right leg underneath herself, put her weight on that right leg, and bend her chest forward as far as kind of her body will allow her to. And so what we want to make sure is when we're doing stretches and mobility work is that we take a deep breath in and relax as we kind of explore those in ranges and sink into it. Good, good. And so another exercise that we kind of do for the hip extensors is a figure four. And so what Beth is going to do is she'll come down to her back. She will take her right ankle and place it right above her left knee, and she'll take her hands and she'll put it under her left thigh, kind of right under the knee, and she'll begin to pull that left leg forward to her chest as much as her body will allow, and again, you really feel that kind of in your glutes. And so she can even kind of use her elbow to kind of keep this right leg neutral if she can. And so, yeah, it's another good stretch for the glutes. So let's go ahead and look at some controlled articular rotations, which also kind of helps with hip mobility. And so now we'll do a little bit of controlled articular rotations. And so this would be good for like a warm-up or kind of a day where you're doing a recovery, just to keep working on that mobility and get that fluid within your hip joints flowing and covering the capsule of our joints. So what she's going to do is she's going to come down to all fours. She's going to take a deep breath in, kind of engage her core. Slowly exhale, and what she's going to do is she's going to take her left leg and she's going to bring it all the way up as far as she can. And so now that she's there, what she's going to do is she's going to come outwards with that left leg. Good, good. And while keeping that knee bent, almost like she's holding a tennis ball or something behind her knee, she's going to, there we go, rotate and begin to go backwards before coming back in. And so if we want, we can reverse this movement, so she can go back in the other direction if she wanted to before switching legs. Good, good. So as you can see, she's going nice in a nice slow and controlled manner. She's not really doing it for speed. So it's all about kind of relaxation and exploring those in ranges with mobility work. So now that we've done some controlled articular rotations, let's go over to some other mobility exercises that we can do for the hips. And so to try to work on exploring those in ranges a little bit more, Beth is going to do what's called a 90-90 mobility flow. And so what she's going to do is she's going to start with her left leg out to the side. And she'll have her right leg kind of in front of her. And so what she wants to do is pretty much create a straight line from her belly button to her thigh, and then a 90-degree angle with a bend in her knee. And she'll also try to do the same thing with her left leg as well. So what she'll do is, what we'll try to do is we'll try to switch positions with our legs. So she'll bring her left leg up and try to rotate that slowly, good, while also keeping that 90-degree, and then start to rotate that right leg outwards. Good, good. So again, this is all about trying to work on those hip flexors and hip extensors and create that mobility within that joint. And so again, maybe about once a day for 3 sets of maybe 5 to 6, you could try this exercise. So give it a try and see if it helps open those hips up a little bit. Again, great for a warm-up, great for a recovery day. So give it a try and let us know how it goes for you guys. And so now that we've kind of gone over really brief overviews of these injuries and kind of how to either proactively train against them or manage them as we're experiencing them, let's bring in another special guest. And so for today's episode, we're bringing in Nick Davies, who is the head of athletic development over at the Academy with Crystal Palace Football Club. So we'll just transition right into that discussion, and hopefully you guys can soak up some good knowledge from Nick.
Okay, cool. And here we are live for our supplemental lockdown endurance running series. And I have a special guest with me today, Nick Davies from the Academy. Nick, do you want to go ahead and kind of introduce yourselves to the people and kind of speak about what your role at the Academy is?
Yeah. Hi guys, hope everyone's doing well. I know it's a difficult situation at the moment. I'm Nick Davies. I'm head of performance at the Academy here at Crystal Palace. Joined the club last January. Came from Swansea. You probably tell by my accent. Love the club already. Feel like the Academy and the club are going in a really good direction, which is why I came. Just hoping I can impart some knowledge to you today that helps you in some sort of way. let's go.
Good. Yeah, and thanks for joining us. Really glad to have you here. And so, yeah, today we're just going to talk about a little bit of prehab and mobility training. So, so for people who may not know necessarily what kind of the ideas are behind prehab or mobility training, kind of what would you, how would you explain that to someone?
I guess we're like having more than just looking at the sport and doing the sport, and understanding that there are things around running, for instance, which you guys are doing that can supplement and help those things. So, like in terms of the basics of like not overdoing it too early. So we'll talk around not having too big spikes in load. So you don't want to jump in volumes or intensities. You want to have you want to allow your body time to recover and adapt, and obviously not jumping up 10 kilometers a week or a day or a session is going to pretty quickly lead you into trouble. So understanding where it is you want to go. So you might have goals around distances you want to run, and then you'll have goals around the times you'll want to do those distances in. And and that way you can split your weeks into intensity. So like you'll be able to run higher intensities for shorter distances, but then split them up, and then you might have a session where you run bigger volumes, and then density is the other one, where you might want to run you might want to run 10k today, but you want to do it at this elevated time that you're not quite at yet. But you can split that into 2 5k runs and do it at a quicker pace than you can do a 10k, have 2 minutes rest, and then another run the next 5k. Like there's lots of different ways to increase your training exposure, or increase what you're doing, without just going after volume all the time, which I think a lot of people often do. And like that's what we'll talk about with our players, is how can we systematically build them in terms of intensity, in terms of volumes, without going into the red zone and putting players at undue risk of getting injured. But there's a lot of things around running or around football that support it. So even something as repeatable as a running stride, there's always subtle differences in each stride. So like ankles, knees, and hips, in terms of mobility, the more control, the more active range of motion you have at those joints, it just gives you additional options in which you can use. And that means you're not chronically overloading any one particular tissue. Like you can spread load throughout your tissues. So like in terms of like our days, we'll generally start with mobility practices in the morning. We might do some soft tissue stuff, and like soft tissue stuff doesn't mean you have to go out and get a masseuse. That could be you have a foam roller at home and you foam roll and do soft tissue work in that way, or with a hockey ball or whatever it is. And then you can do some more static based stretching, where you're trying to open up ranges that are getting tight because you're working. And then like as well as stretching, you're going to want to work through ranges and be able to produce forces through full ranges. Otherwise it's not going to be active and you're not going to be able to use it. So like obviously that's one part of the program. It's a big part of the program. And then how we then build these ranges of motion into something that's more functional, with our strength work, with our power work, with our plyometric work, and then obviously our more sport specific preparation in terms of our warm-ups. The whole package is important. and don't neglect it.
So yeah, so it sounds like just kind of having that functional range in your hips and knees and joints, well, and ankles, kind of helps create the foundation for good performance. It sounds like.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. You know, we're trying to create tissues that are tolerant to what they need to do, and yeah, we're trying to overload the key mechanics that players are going to need for football. But it's no different for any sport. You know, you need to look at the sport. Like running and just long distance running might be more simple than something like football, but look at the mechanics, you know, that running gait, and then how you can overload that, how you can make sure that the ranges of motion you need, particularly ankles and hips, are still there, and are still functioning well. And yeah, those are things you can take care of, you know, all the time, every week, every day. You know, you get into a routine with it. It doesn't have to take you forever. You know, there's routines you can do that are 3 or 4 minutes long, and they act as yeah, like soft tissue maintenance, but they can also act as a warm up and be part of the session. So don't feel like you need to be stretching for an hour a day. You know, something that's concise and well thought through can, you know, can really help in the long term.
Okay, good. Thanks for that feedback. So for someone who maybe wanted to, I guess, go through like a mobility routine for their hips, so is that something that we would generally kind of recommend? Maybe like you said, kind of like once a day before a run, so even just kind of like to help prepare you for your run, a little bit of mobility work in the hips.
Yeah. There's lots of good guys out there that put this stuff up on Instagram and Twitter, and like some of the guys that I follow are guys called Functional Range Systems. You know, they have a cardio articular rotations routine that goes through every joint. It takes about 5 minutes. Starts at the neck, shoulders, and then goes thoracic spine, hips, knees, ankles, and toes. Like, and all that aims to do is, you know, actively go through full ranges of motion, make sure you have the control through those end ranges of motion that you need. Yeah, and it's just a really good tick over every day. I do it every morning myself. You know, it's simple, it's easy, it gives you what you need. Yeah, I'd recommend it.
Yeah, thanks. Perfect. I'm sure people will probably look into that and find something that best suits them for their needs. But and so just kind of going back to, I guess, injury prevention, it sounds like you were touching on that kind of principle of progressive overload. So not just doing everything in the first week, but just kind of trying to build up to that, I guess, ultimate goal someone may have for a marathon in terms of distance covered or volume.
Yeah, people need to obviously use this for whatever situation they're in. But obviously, if I set my goal to run a marathon and I haven't run for the last couple of weeks, I'm not going to start at marathon distance, and I'm going to slowly build myself up to that. So, like, you'll have an idea of what should be a comfortable distance for you to run, but you obviously need to be aware and listen to your body at the same time. What I'd say is not to make too big a jump. So, you know, and not to expect yourself to linearly get better week by week and session by session. Like in sleep and recovery and nutrition, all those things affect you on a day-to-day basis. So, like, yeah, building yourself up. Like, you wouldn't want to 10% rule is generally what we use. So we wouldn't want to jump by more than 10% in any one thing. So like volumes, if you've run 10 miles, generally wouldn't jump to 15 in the next session. We're looking to build in 10% as we go. But yeah, it depends how long you've got, obviously. Yeah, it's quite a question that quite specific to everybody, but yeah, have an end goal. So the marathon I'm going to run is in 6 weeks' time.
Mhm.
Work back from that, what I need to be doing at each step, and then start from there. I would.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So in terms of I guess obviously when you're addressing like the injury history of someone, or when someone's addressing their own injury history, how important is it to, I guess, try to put aside time to kind of address those problem areas, or build in a routine of workouts that'll kind of help, I guess, strengthen those weak areas in the chain.
Yeah, really important. Understanding the mechanism of the injury and like where you have pain. Generally, we'll go through a stage by stage approach where can we produce force isometrically, so produce force without anything moving, and then slowly build it up. Like can we develop force concentrically and then eccentrically, and can we put the full thing together, and can we do it at velocities and keep on increasing the specificity of that action. But what I would say is, whilst you are rehabbing any one particular area, not to let everything else just slide, which is a common thing, is we just fix this problem and everything else goes out the window, and there's, even if you got a broken foot, for example, like there's still ways you can train your cardiovascular system to maintain a level of fitness, and it might be on a skiometer or ski erg, I should say, but finding ways in which you can still maintain a level of activity or have some kind of specificity with your training. Yeah, I'd say try not just focus on the problem area, and make sure that everything's covered whilst you're obviously maintaining or trying to improve that area.
Great. Well, yeah, I mean, I think we pretty much covered the general, I guess, overview of why we work on mobility training, and kind of progressively increasing our load to avoid injury, but also just trying to generally address problem areas while not letting deficits grow in other areas as well. So yeah, I think that was pretty much all for me today. So thank you, Nick, for your time. Really appreciate it, and good luck to your teams throughout the season.
No problem at all. Thanks, Enrico, for having me. Good luck, guys. Hope to see you soon.
So that's pretty much all we had from Nick and myself today. Hopefully you guys have soaked up some really good information. I really encourage you to kind of try this stuff if you're experiencing any of the issues that we kind of talked about today, or any other issues. And so again, just kind of trying it, maybe starting out like a couple times a week, and then progressing to once a day for about 3 sets of 10 to 15 reps. So starting conservatively and increasing that as we kind of go on, and really just kind of seeing how your body responds to it. So hopefully you guys like today's episode. Give us a like and subscribe to the Palace for Life YouTube channel, and drop us a comment to let us know what you thought about the episode, or some things that you kind of do to help fight against those injuries, or manage them. As always, I'm Coach Enrico. Stick with us for next week's episode. Be on the lookout for that, where we'll kind of cover some strength endurance exercises to help with endurance running performance. Stay safe, and I will see you next week.